So when it comes to methane getting into the water, it does happen. The problem is it's usually or often nothing to do with fracking. So I've traveled to these cities, and Dimmock is sort of ground zero for the concerns for a lot of these places. Dimmock is a little city in Pennsylvania, and I've talked to old timers, and they say, Greg, when I was in school, we used to go to school, turn on the faucet, light a match, and run for it, and it blew up. There are three. The reason being is that in some parts of this country, natural gas naturally emits from the ground. It's rather shallow in the formation, and it gets in and it gets into the water. There are 3 towns in this country called Burning Springs as a result. There's a Burning Springs, Kentucky, the Burning Springs, New York, and I forget the third one. The American, the natives, they used to light it as to impress others. So often, not always, often the methane that you see in those movies and others that gets into the water, and it does, it's naturally, and it's always been there. That's the issue about methane. I'm going to come back to where the industry has it wrong. The second is the chemicals. So chemicals are a concern because you don't want to be ingesting them. But if you talk to scientists, as I did, most of them say that it's unlikely these chemicals, which are drilled way down on the ground, are somehow going to come up to our water table. So in most of the areas where we're drilling, we could go as low as 14,000 feet. 13,000 feet below the surface is where they're doing the wells. And our water system is much lower. It's about 400 feet or lower. And it's possible that the chemicals are going to rise over time through the wellbore, but it's really unlikely, again, if you talk to sort of scientists. And the third area is the issue of tremors and earthquakes. And truth of the matter is there haven't been real earthquakes. There have been more tremors. Sometimes you feel them, sometimes you don't. And it's not necessarily an issue of fracking. It's the way it's afterwards. It's injecting back into the ground. And supposedly they can do a better job of figuring out where to inject the waste afterwards. But it's an issue in some areas, and supposedly the industry is doing a better job of figuring things out ahead of time. So that's why I'm not that concerned about the environmental issues when it comes to fracking. That's why I say fracking can be done properly. But the problem is it often isn't being done properly, and that's where the industry has it all wrong. So there are many examples, and I document them in my book, of leaks. If you there's different data about it, but I've seen data that as many as 1 in 10 wells, the casing or surrounding the well has to be remediated, as they call it. So it has to be improved, and that's very disconcerting. You can get problems there. So there's spills. It's noisy. It's dirty. The air pollution it's caused is clear. There have been all kinds of towns really split and impacted by this. It causes, there's about 5 million gallons of water per well when you frack, and that causes, well, first of all, you need a lot of water, A, fresh water, and B, it causes all kinds of truck usage in these areas, and there are trucks going back and forth when there's fracking. So the industry messes up left and right over and over again. And I document it in my book. My argument, and it's not just my view, it's the view of others like the Environmental Defense Fund, is that we're going to be fracking in this country. About 90% of wells in this country right now are fracked. So let's work with the industry, let's put pressure on them and make sure they do a better job and do it safely, as opposed to just sort of condemning it, and they're going to go on doing it anyway.